Welcome to B'madzaje Ginonindwa. This podcast is produced by the Communications Department at the Anishinaabe Nation. We will be focusing on the issues and initiatives in Anishinaabe Nation territory. I'm your host, Lisa Abel. It's been a whirlwind few months as First Nations across Ontario are facing the threat of two bills that have the potential to seriously impact our inherent and treaty rights. In mid-April, the Ontario Legislature tabled Bill 5, the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act. With this bill, the provincial government intends to move quickly on creating special economic zones, starting with the Ring of Fire, where mining infrastructure and energy projects can bypass various provincial and municipal laws, posing serious risks to the environment, species, and Indigenous cultural sites. And in early June, the federal government introduced Bill C-5, an act to enact the Free Trade and Labour Mobility in Canada Act and the Building Canada Act. Bill C-5 also proposes sweeping new powers that would allow the federal government to fast-track major infrastructure projects. At the core of First Nations opposition to both of these bills is the fact that the First Nations were not consulted before the bills were drafted, in what is seen as a failure to respect the principles of lawful consultation, environmental due process, inherent rights, Aboriginal title, and Aboriginal treaty protected rights. With the majority government in the Ontario Legislature, Bill 5 quickly made its way through all stages of the legislative process, despite opposition from MPPs, citizens of Ontario, and First Nations. Time to debate the bill on the floor of the legislature was curtailed, as were the standing committee meetings usually devoted to close study of a bill. In this episode of B'madzaje Ginonindwa, we'll be taking a deep dive to hear what our Anishinaabe leadership had to say about Bill 5. What are the goals of Bill 5? How will Bill 5 impact First Nations? How was this bill fast-tracked through the legislature? And what are our next steps going forward now that Bill 5 has passed? This February, after a snap winter election, Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives secured a third majority government, and in their view, a strong mandate to protect Ontario's jobs and economy from the threat of tariffs by U.S. President Donald Trump. Premier Doug Ford campaigned on ambitious promises to fight back against U.S. tariffs, in part by achieving the fastest permitting for job creators and critical projects in the G7, and removing unnecessary federal barriers and red tape from major projects under provincial jurisdiction, including scrapping redundant and wrong-headed impact assessment requirements that unnecessarily raise costs and slow down approvals for nation-building projects like Ontario's new grid-scale nuclear power plants and critical mineral projects in the Ring of Fire. In congratulating Premier Doug Ford on securing a third term, Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Chief Linda Dubosky noted that the Anishinaabe Nation welcomed working with the provincial government and look forward to sharing our priorities that reflect the Anishinaabe Nation's focus on self-determination, cultural preservation, and equitable access to resources and services for our people, with the emphasis being on our rights-based agenda. As U.S. President Donald Trump moved forward in early March with plans to impose 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, First Nations immediately raised the alarm, with the Chiefs of Ontario and Anishinaabe-Aski Nation stating that tariffs would increase the financial hardship for First Nations in more northern communities, where access to essential goods is more expensive due to high transportation costs. The Robinson-Huron-Wawin-Damagewin Chiefs, representing the 21 First Nations of the Robinson-Huron Treaty, also expressed concern that the minerals, forestry, and energy resources on Robinson-Huron Treaty lands had long been extracted without equitable participation or consent from First Nations, and affirmed their right to be part of any discussion that involves their lands and treaties. The federal election, called for April 28th, heightened concerns about future federal responses to economic uncertainty. Our Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Chief reminded both federal candidates and voters that Anishinaabe First Nations must be consulted and accommodated, with our consent required prior to any mining or resource activities that may impact our territories. These lands bear significance beyond geographic areas. They're integral to the cultural, spiritual, physical, and economic well-being of the Anishinaabe people. In the meantime, the newly re-elected Ontario government acted quickly to move its agenda forward. Stephen Lecce, Ontario Minister of Energy and Mines, introduced Bill 5, Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025, on April 17th in the Ontario Legislature. The omnibus bill had been written and tabled within 35 business days of the provincial election. Speaking at the Toronto Stock Exchange on April 17th, Premier Doug Ford outlined the goals of Bill 5.
Today, we're introducing the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act. This legislation will streamline Ontario's permitting system. It will cut through the red tape and the delays so we can get shovels in the ground to build big things faster. This legislation will create new economic zones, regions of significant importance to the economic success and security of Ontario, including the Ring of Fire, to dramatically speed up approvals and permitting for mining projects and the critical infrastructure needed to support our economy. We're also introducing a new one project, one process permitting model to reduce approvals for new mining projects by 50%.
At the same press conference, Greg Rickford, whose full title is Minister of Indigenous Affairs and First Nations Economic Reconciliation, and Minister responsible for Ring of Fire economic and community partnerships, said that Ontario is looking to partner with First Nations.
Indigenous partnerships, be they community or businesses, want to play an important and essential role as we build this out. Under the vision of the Premier of Ontario, he's been very clear. The next chapter of reconciliation with First Nations across Ontario will have a sharpened focus on economic reconciliation.
Rickford emphasized that the work would take place in partnership with Indigenous businesses and communities.
It's clear. Economic and community partnerships play an essential role in what we're building under the vision of our Premier. And I'm sure what Minister Lecce has to say today and the Premier's remarks will send a clear signal to the people of Ontario and to the Indigenous business community and communities that we want and we expect a full and meaningful partnership, because that has been the way since we've been in government that these projects have advanced quickly, efficiently, and effectively.
Energy and Mines Minister Stephen Lecce added that it can take more than a decade to open a mine in Ontario, but that the process would be streamlined while fulfilling both the province's duty to consult and preserving environmental protections.
We're going to make it easier and faster to get the permits needed to get approvals for mines, period. And we're going to do so in a socially responsible way that preserves our duty to consult obligations and the robust environmental protections that are being strengthened today. And we're taking a socially, environmentally, and economically responsible approach to pursue aggressive economic outcomes.
Stephen Lecce also added a shout out to Indigenous communities.
Now, I want to first acknowledge and thank the Indigenous communities, as Minister Rickford said, their leadership and advocacy as we really navigate this path forward.
Bill 5, in fact, also has a longer name, an act to enact the Special Economic Zones Act 2025, to amend the Endangered Species Act 2007, and to replace it with the Species Conservation Act 2025, and to amend various acts and revoke various regulations in relation to development and to procurement. As mentioned, Bill 5 had been drafted and tabled without First Nations consultation, and the changes to legislation will impact First Nations lands, environmental and species protections, and inherent and treaty rights. With a progressive Conservative majority in the legislature, the likelihood of the bill being passed very quickly required a swift response. The Anishinaabe Nation called upon the provincial government to halt advancement of Bill 5 and engage in meaningful consultation with First Nations. In a press release, the Anishinaabe Nation noted that Bill 5 in its current form continues to ignore, violate, and threaten the inherent rights of Anishinaabe people and the foundational principles of their treaty relationship with the Crown. Anishinaabe continue to have inherent jurisdiction, and these rights are recognized and affirmed in the Canadian Constitution. The amendments to existing legislation, such as the Environmental Assessment Act, the Environmental Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the Ontario Heritage Act, would increase economic development at the expense of environmental and species protections and historical evidence of First Nations on the land. The designation of special economic zones, trusted proponents, and designated projects to speed up development would override environmental protections and First Nation inherent and treaty rights. Within a special economic zone, land cited for development would be exempt from protective checks and balances, such as archaeological assessments and wildlife and ecosystem protections. It would set back species at risk protection and lead to the destruction of First Nation burial sites and artifacts. Were the province to delegate consultation processes to proponents, that is, exploration, mining, and other companies looking to develop projects, it would be a failure of the Crown's obligation to consult, a failure to understand the treaty relationships, and a disregard of the nation-to-nation relationships between Anishinaabe and the Crown. The Anishinaabe Nation prepared a written submission regarding Bill 5 and anticipated an in-person presentation once the bill moved to review by committee at the legislature. Within 12 days of the bill being introduced, legislators began its second reading, with debates on the House floor from April 29th until May 6th, when it was referred to the Standing Committee on the Interior. Saul Mamakwa, MPP for Kiwetnug, is the deputy leader of the official opposition and Shadow Minister for Indigenous and Treaty Relations, and the Shadow Minister for Northern Economic Development and Growth. He is Anishinaabe and a member of Kingfisher Lake First Nation, and the only First Nations MPP in the Ontario legislature. On May 1st, Mamakwa said that Bill 5 was using the tariff war as a pretext to access the resources in the north, while trampling on the rights of the people who live there. To call it economic reconciliation, he said, doesn't do much unless it recognizes First Nations' full decision-making authority over our treaty lands. Mamakwa offered a First Nations perspective on the meaning of free, prior, and informed consent.
The very concept of fast-tracking infrastructure on Indigenous lands, on our homelands, contradicts the legal principle of free, prior, and informed consent. Free, prior, and informed consent contains in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. To me, when I say free, prior, informed consent, free means the rights holders, the nations, should not have to pay a dime on that process, on that consultation. It is on the government. Prior means to me before any drill goes into the ground on our homelands, we should be talking first, not after. Informed to me means that the rights holders of these lands, of these homelands, understand in our own language to make sure we know what exactly is happening or what exactly these mines will be doing. Consent to me means, after all, the whole process of duty to consult, the free, prior, informed consent, the rights holders have the right to say yes or no if the project should proceed. Because, we have to understand how negatively the lands, the resources, the people will be impacted.
As debate on the bill continued on May 5th, Mamakwa again asked why weren't any First Nations consulted on Bill 5 prior to the tabling of the legislation. Other MPPs also spoke in support of respecting First Nations treaty rights and free, prior, and informed consent. By May 6th, the bill was sent to the Standing Committee on the Interior, which met later that afternoon. The committee meeting started with a motion that they go in camera. Mamakwa, assuming that the in-camera discussion would be about Bill 5, said that the committee should travel the bill to listen to the rights holders and the impacts of when we talk about free, prior, and informed consent. He suggested they visit a few fly-in First Nations. Other opposition MPPs on the committee agreed that it was important to be transparent and that people from across Ontario were concerned about the bill. This request did not go forward. The committee scheduled in-person public hearings for May 22nd and 26th at the Legislature in Toronto. The first day of public hearings was structured so that Stephen Lecce, sponsor of the bill, had 20 minutes to make an opening statement, followed by 2 rounds of questions by the committee members. Each presenter was given 7 minutes, followed by questions by the committee. Over 2 days, First Nations representatives, mining and energy industry representatives, environmental groups, labor, chambers of commerce, and municipalities presented their concerns. Grand Council Chief Dubosky attended alongside Chief Duncan Mishano of Bittigong Nishnabek. Grand Council Chief Dubosky reiterated that Anishinaabe Nation First Nations are not opposed to development and strengthening our collective economy, but we were disappointed and concerned that Ontario was going forward without any meaningful consultation, engagement, and accommodation to our First Nations. She urged the government to not sell out our First Nation rights, heritage, and history, or sacrifice our environment, water, and species at risk. To ignore First Nations and treaty rights to implement Bill 5, as written, would trigger conflicts and court challenges. In closing, she said that Ontario needed to learn from the past to avoid conflicts resulting from government-expedited processes and hoped that we could work together to strengthen Ontario's economy, together with all First Nations, coming together as treaty partners. Anishinaabe Nation Lake Huron Regional Chief Scott McLeod spoke on behalf of the Robinson Huron Wawindamagewin.
I want to start with a reminder, and the reminder is that Ontario is not a nation. The Robinson Huron Treaty of 1850 is pre-Confederation. It's pre-Canada and definitely pre-Ontario. It's based on a nation-to-nation relationship, and within that there are treaty obligations that contain free, prior, and informed consent. And notably in those 3 terms, prior is the operative word here, and we are not getting prior consent on this bill. It's also a message that the obligations to treaty are not unnecessary red tape. We've heard a lot today over the day, even from some of the opposition MPPs, that this entire bill is based on promises and trust me that we're going to do this. And I pose the question to the government of Ontario, what reasons do we have to trust you? If we look at our relationship over the last 170 years, I think you'll struggle to find a reason as to why we should actually trust you, and that's why we're asking for non-derogation, abrogation clauses built into the legislation, not in preamble, not in appendices, but built into that. If your commitment is that strong to comply with the consultations regarding treaty, free, prior, and informed consent, then build it into the bill. We don't see that, and we don't trust you. I'm just being blunt. We don't trust that it'll be upheld. So we are not in opposition of any development. We are looking for responsible development. This bill was introduced without consultation of First Nations, without consent, and disregard for any Anishinaabe laws and jurisdictions within our territories. The legislation centralizes decision-making in cabinet. It overrides land uses, processes, environmental laws, which is the basis of our treaty. The basis of our treaty was based in environmental protection. These are our homelands. It fast-tracks development at the expense of oversight. When my friend Mr. Mauqua pressed Mr. Lecce and Mr. Rickford about their understanding of Aboriginal title and treaty, they had no answer. They kept deflecting to Section 35 of Canada's Constitution. Let's be clear. Our relationship is not based on Canada's Constitution. Our rights do not come from Section 35. They are inherent rights. Our relationship is not defined by Section 35. They're defined by treaty. We also heard yesterday about $3.1 billion in investments which have been earmarked for investments in First Nations. Investments in First Nations are mandatory, regardless of Bill 5. It's repulsive to listen to this government use treaty obligations as political leverage to pass their bill. Our First Nations, particularly in the North, have been suffering for over a century of neglect of this government. We hear industry talk about how economic benefits are going to save, the livelihoods and the way of living for Canadians. I'm sure they have fresh drinking water in their taps. I'm sure the water in their toilets is cleaner than the tap water in some of our First Nations. Our treaties need to be upheld. Ontario does not outright own the lands in our treaty territories. We agreed to share them.
Thank you very much. The time is up.
Dean Sayers, former chief of Batchewana First Nation, also spoke on behalf of the Robinson Huron-Waawindimagewin.
Since the 1870s, we've been getting $4 a year as our half of the revenues generated from the resources. And I'm saying this because I know the eyes of the world are watching, and people from all around the world are watching what's happening here in Ontario, because they were all watching what we ended up doing with the annuities issue, and we finally got a settlement of $10 billion because Ontario and Canada did not honor the promises they made in the treaty, and we had to take you to court. When are you going to learn? Why do we have to continue to go to these, and this is very disrespectful today to my people, to our leadership. I shouldn't have 7 minutes on my land with my guests to talk about the challenges we're facing in 2025 as the original peoples of these lands. I could go through a litany of obligations you have that are still legally in force. Somebody has been ill-advising you that what you're doing is actually aligned with law. You are breaking Ontario law, you're breaking Canada's law, you're breaking international law, and most important, you're breaking Anishinaabe law, our promises we made in witness of all creation. I'm not sure I would be so proud of that. You need to align yourself with the reality of what you actually have. When we made treaties with you, in particular our treaty, we went to that treaty and we had a canoe full of everything that we were going to exercise as our inherent rights. Our own law, our own language, our own people, our own culture, our own everything that it is, including the moose, the deer, the fish, the trees, everything. And we gave you a little bit in your canoe, a little access to natural resources. We didn't give you all of these jurisdictions you're exercising. You need to take inventory of what you have. What you need to do is take that inventory and act aligned with what you actually legally have jurisdiction over. And in the meantime, if you're going to do something on our lands, you need our permission. Read my lips. Permission. Consent. Doesn't rise to the bar that I need, because I don't want to misinterpret it as according to UNDRIP. So let's engage, let's consult, and then maybe we'll give you our permission. If you don't get our permission, you ain't doing it.
On Monday, May 26th, First Nations leadership from across Ontario held a press conference to outline how Bill 5 undermines the Crown's duty to consult and accommodate and disregards First Nations' right to free, prior, and informed consent. Grand Council Chief Dubosky called on Ontario to withdraw Bill 5 and start over, or we would resist.
I can't reiterate enough that Bill 5 significantly increases the chances of conflict with all of our nations in Ontario. The Anishinaabe nations, First Nations, stand with our brothers and sisters to the north of us, to the east to us, to the west and to the south. I just want to say in closing that Ontario is trying to legislate us out of the conversation. That won't work. First Nations have always protected these lands, and we will continue to do so. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. First Nations will fight back. We will not stand by while our rights are ignored, our lands are targeted, and our treaties are not upheld. The Crown must honor its obligations or face the consequences of continuing to violate them. Withdraw Bill 5. There is no path forward with this legislation in its current form. Repeal it, start again, work with us, with our First Nations, with our treaty nations, with our Aboriginal title nations, so that we can create something that will allow us to ensure not only that our economy survive, but our environment, our lands, our waters, our animals are here for our great-great-great-grandchildren, those of whom we will never meet, but we are responsible for them today. I caution the government, similar as how I've stated through testimony earlier last week and through our formal submissions, that should this bill proceed in its current form, we will be idle no more. Miigwech.
Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict reiterated that First Nations aren't against development, but that consultation has to happen with all First Nation communities.
Well, I think that, the disparity in communities is great. The overcrowding, not enough homes, inadequate homes, unclean drinking water. If there's anybody that understands why there's a sense of urgency, it's our people. And so to classify that, we need to, extract these resources right away, our people understand urgency. But it's how it's done in the process. And the government needs to come to the table, have respectful conversations that are built upon the honor that they have. Government doesn't choose when they should be honorable or not. By forming government, it comes with the obligations that government carries. And that's to be honorable to the relationship that they have with First Nations people. And so we want prosperity. We want jobs. We want to bring about economies to our communities. But it's sitting down at the table with the rights holder, the 133 First Nations that are in Ontario, and having those constructive conversations. Because legislating colonial legislation of how it's going to be, how government says this is going to happen, we've seen since contact. And so the Chiefs of Ontario advocates for the communities in this region, but the Chiefs of Ontario is not a rights holder, nor are we a one-stop shop for consultation.
Debate on Bill 5 continued during question period, with opposition members continuing to call for withdrawal of the bill. The Standing Committee began to review the bill, clause by clause. Between the evening of May 28th at 4 until midnight, NDP and Liberal MPPs used every technical tool at their disposal to keep the bill in committee for as long as possible and stop Bill 5 from passing before the end of the spring session of the legislature. Debate on Bill 5 continued Monday, June 2nd, with the opposition reminding the government that the failure to obtain free, prior, and informed consent of First Nations would probably result in legal battles. Mamakwa rose to speak about Bill 5 with an eagle feather in his right hand.
Speaker, First Nations in Ontario do not want Bill 5. I say no to Bill 5. Last week, the government said that they respect First Nations, that they respect treaty rights. Speaker, we know the Premier is telling untruths to First Nations about...
We'll ask the member to withdraw.
It's not telling the truth.
But that's the truth.
I will ask the member to withdraw.
That is the truth. Going.
We'll ask the member to withdraw.
Speaker, Premier is telling untruths. That's the truth.
I will warn the member. Please withdraw.
Our rights are not being respected.
Withdraw the comment.
I'm not withdrawing. Speak.
Sam Mamakwa, you have been named.
Mamakwa was escorted from the chamber. Opposition leader Merritt Stiles walked out with him. In a scrum in the legislature hallway, a reporter asked Mamakwa to explain what the premier said that he considered to be untruthful.
That he respects and honors treaties, that he respects and honors the duty to consult. And that's not the truth, because the way they're presenting this bill, the way the bill is written up, speaks the opposite.
While the debate continued in the legislature, First Nations leadership, community members, and allies gathered on the Queen's Park front lawn for a peaceful rally and round dance opposing Bill 5. In continued unity and solidarity, a number of organizations partnered with the Robinson Huron-Wawendamagewin to host the rally, including Anishinaabeg Nation, Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, Chiefs of Ontario, Grand Council Treaty 3, Independent First Nations, and Anishinaabe-Aski Nation, Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinak, Phil Fontaine, Saul Mamakwa, and representatives from other First Nations, as well as Idle No More Ontario, were invited to speak. Grand Council Chief Dubosky reminded everyone to look at the bigger picture, as it appeared that the federal government would also be tabling legislation aimed at speeding up development.
I'm here today to not only talk about Bill 5, but to talk about the unity that we need together. When we are together like a braid of sweetgrass, we are strong and nothing can break us. Today is day one for all of us together, not only across this province, but we have to stand with our brothers and sisters across this country, because the same things are going to be happening to them. When we stand up, we not only stand up in this province, we stand up across this country supporting our brothers and sisters who are going through very similar things. I just want to say Chimigwech to everybody here. Never forget what our ancestors have done for us today, and that is still our responsibility, not just today, but every day going forward. And any attempt that this government or any government attempts to do on their own without us is the day we rise up. And we rise up today. Today is day one. It doesn't stop here. We need to keep this going. We need to make them uncomfortable, and we need to know we're still here.
Bill 5! Kill Bill 5! Kill Bill 5! Kill Bill 5!
However, in the legislature, later that afternoon, the majority moved to limit the remaining time to consider Bill 5. The Standing Committee was given one additional day to review the bill and a hard deadline of Wednesday, June 4th, to return Bill 5 to the House for its final reading, with one last hour of debate. The Anishinaabeg Nation chiefs gathered in London for the Grand Council Assembly, which presented an important opportunity for leadership from across the territory to discuss Bill 5 together. Deputy Grand Council Chief Chris Plain, And Southwest Regional Chief Joe Muskokamon warned Northern First Nations how harmful unregulated development had been to their lands and communities, and that the federal government was probably not far behind in introducing legislation of their own.
You know, my treaty is almost 200 years old, 1827. We're just coming up to 200 years. And, you know, with the likes of Bill 5, you know, a community like mine, we come from Aamjiwnaang. Many of you understand the logistics that we face there. And, you know, I'm a proud descendant of 4 of those people who signed that treaty. But, you know, the first 100 years was all settlement. But it was the last 100 years that we've seen all the industrial development, all because of unregulated industrial development, which then led to a lot of provincial laws that were put into place to protect us, you know, to address the issues that we had been raising for so long. You know, so now to go against the rule of law, to break their own laws, you know, is because a community like mine, developed without any regulations, is going to end up being your communities next. And if, you know, you just have to look at the mandate of the provincial government and understand, you know, where they're coming from and where they want to go. So it's ultimately up to us to protect our lands and resources for our future generations. You know, we've had both provincial and federal elections, and you know, right out of the gate comes these bills. And you know, I don't think Mr. Carney's far behind in you know, drafting bills to go before the House, you know, similar to what we see in Bill 5. And you can't tell me that you know, they didn't draft these bills you know, prior to them even being elected, which obviously then left us out of, you know, any discussions. And that is obviously what our concerns are. But we've been busy, along with our staff, analyzing the bill, you know, to come up with potential impacts, you know, and all of our departments have shared in the contributions immensely to that effort, you know, to help prepare our Grand Council chief to make those submissions to the committees.
Here's Southwest Regional Chief Joe Muskokamon.
The Southwest is unique in a number of ways. One way that is just now coming to prominence is that this is the fastest growing area in Canada outside of the GTA. We're having the largest industrial boom, the largest housing needs, the largest amount of influx of people coming to reside within this territory than any place in Canada. And so the changes that are going to be upon us, upon our First Nations, upon our treaties, the pressure that it's going to place in terms of exercising our rights, and I warn our friends of the North, if you want to see what you're going to look like, look at us. Every time there is another corridor put through your treaty, every time there is another transmission line put through, every time there's another road built, every time there is another rezoning taking place by municipalities, every time the provincial government puts down their land policy that the municipalities have to adhere to, your rights are going to shrink. Your rights will continue to shrink. And it is at the cost of the spirit of the land. It is at the cost of our future generations. It will be at the cost of our environment. It will be at the cost of the water. Who will pay for that? Because those are costs that are never taken onto the balance sheet. Those are costs that are never attributed to population growth and expansion. Those are the costs of industrialization. And we face today, my family, we face today a dual threat, one from the federal side and one from now in the provincial side known as Bill 5. That is going to set up these economic zones. And as other people have said, at the cost of what? They will once again build their economies on our backs. They will once again prosper at the cost of our children. They will once again throw aside the values that they claim that they represent in respect for the water and the nature and the animals and the land. They will throw that up in the air. Virginia, beware. We are entering dangerous times. As the Grand Council Chief said, we must stand together as a family, now more than ever. And we need to tell the story to our children. We need to pass those stories, that history, our legacy, our determination. We must pass that on.
A group strategy session produced a statement on behalf of the Anishinaabe Nation Chiefs in Assembly, once more demanding an immediate withdrawal of Bill 5. At Lake Huron Regional Chief Scott McLeod's request, Head Getsit, Richard Asinaway, led a ceremony where a gift of sema, tobacco, was collected to deliver to MPP Saul Mamakwa on behalf of Anishinaabe as he returned to the legislature for the final day of debate and vote on Bill 5. Due to the shortened time to discuss Bill 5 at committee and the contentious filibustering, many of the proposed amendments to the bill were not discussed or adopted. Debate on the floor was heated. Mamakwa reminded everyone of the process that had led to the vote and what would happen going forward.
And I think, my concern was the real issues of First Nations people were never brought to light. I think it's important that we focus on making this bill better. And the last speaker just mentioned that they're going to pass this bill as is. We should be rescinding Bill 5. We heard that First Nations, we heard that rights holders will use every possible avenue, the legislature, the media, the courts, eventually action on the land itself to defend their lands, their waters, and most importantly, Speaker, their inherent rights and treaty rights. Miigwech.
The bill quickly moved through the third reading, final debate, and a vote. Visitors in the gallery pleaded with the MPPs to listen to First Nations and rescind the bill.
The ayes being 71, the nays being 44, I declare the motion carried. I'm calling a 5-minute recess.
Bill 5, an act to enact the Special Economic Zones Act 2025, to amend the Endangered Species Act 2007, and to replace it with the Species Conservation Act 2025, and to amend various acts and revoke various regulations in relation to development and to procurement, was passed. The final version of Bill 5 mentions the duty to consult within the amendments to the Mining Act, noting that the Ministry of Mines could support efforts to fulfill the Crown's duty to consult, and that service standards would not apply to the time required for the duty to consult with Aboriginal communities. The new Species Conservation Act states that for greater certainty, nothing in this act shall be construed so as to abrogate or derogate from the protection provided for the existing Aboriginal or treaty rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada as recognized and affirmed in Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. Now that Bill 5 has passed, what are our next steps? The Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council passed Resolution Number 2025-17, expressing their formal opposition to the bill and their plans going forward, including investigating all opportunities for partnership and support in advocating Anishinaabe Nation opposition to Bill 5 until such partnership is reflected in the bill. Grand Council is also working on an Anishinaabe Nation strategic response framework for legislative threats to jurisdiction, which will be brought to the Anishinaabe Nation regions for review as advocacy work moves forward. As our Anishinaabe chiefs reminded us throughout this process, threats to First Nations jurisdiction continue. June 6th, the Canadian House of Commons introduced Bill C-5, an act to enact the Free Trade and Labour Mobility in Canada Act and the Building Canada Act. Bill C-5 also proposes new powers that would allow the federal government to fast-track major infrastructure projects. Under the legislation, a single federal minister would be authorized to approve projects, override regulatory protections, and bypass environmental and social safeguards, all without returning to Parliament for further approval. According to the Chiefs of Ontario, First Nations were given fewer than 7 days to respond to an outline of the bill, with no ability to read the full text, and Parliament is on track to pass the bill in under a week. This not only defies colonial government's own principles of transparency and accountability, but also directly contradicts Canada's own laws, namely the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Ignoring consultation with First Nations will only lead to costly delays and legal battles. As the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities met on June 17th to review Bill C-5, delegates from the Chiefs of Ontario left their annual Chiefs Assembly in Hiawatha First Nation and traveled to Ottawa to rally on Parliament Hill, continuing the fight for another day.
Good afternoon, Kanawea. Waseo Bendishnakas, Sadik Dorem, Chiging Donjaba, Anishinaabe Kwendao. I am the elected Grand Council Chief for the Anishinaabe Nation here in Ontario. Our people are rich. We're rich with our ceremony. We're rich with our families. We're rich with our culture. And we are absolutely so rich that we can make a country rise up. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be strategic because our ancestors were always strategic. They watched and listened. That's why we're still here today. And we will continue to oppose any types of legislation that hurt our people.
For more information about Bill 5, Chiefs of Ontario has created a webpage featuring key developments, calls to action, and resources. You can get involved by learning more about Bill 5, hosting a workshop, or participating in a letter writing campaign to MPPs. And keep your eye on our Anishinaabe Nation social platforms for updates. Find the links in the podcast description. This episode includes the tracks Brothers by Wolf Saga and Chippewa Travelers, Following the Rhythm by Justin Delorme, and Over the North by Shauna Sitinak, licensed by Nagamo Publishing. The drum groups were Buffalo Charging and Medicine Lodge Singers. Chimigwech for listening to Bamadzije Ginonindwa. Until next time, Bama Pi.